In the fall of 1857, inside a grand Georgia plantation house, 12 white masters gathered around a lavish Thanksgiving table. Golden roasted turkeys, steaming pies, and crystal glasses of brandy lined the feast. They laughed, boasted, and raised their cups. But within the hour their laughter turned to groans. Their throats burned, their stomachs twisted, and one by one they collapsed in agony. None of them realized until it was too late. The woman who served their food, the enslaved cook named Harriet, had poisoned them all. Georgia, 1857. The South was at the height of its power, built on cotton and slavery. Plantations stretched for miles, their wealth measured not only in acres of land but in the number of enslaved people forced to work it. Thanksgiving, recently popularized as a holiday of bounty and gratitude, was celebrated on these estates with grotesque excess. The masters dined like kings, while those who cooked and served the food often went to bed hungry. On the Clyburn plantation lived Harriet. She was in her early 30s, strong from years of labor, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Unlike most field hands, Harriet worked in the kitchen. From before dawn until late into the night, she baked bread, stewed meats, and seasoned dishes that she herself was rarely allowed to taste. Harriet's master, Colonel Edward Clyburn, prided himself on order and control. He was wealthy, brutal, and deeply feared. He hosted gatherings of other plantation owners, evenings filled with whiskey, politics, and boasts about yields of cotton. But behind the grandeur was a constant undercurrent of violence. Harriet had seen women dragged to the fields after childbirth, men whipped until their skin split, children sold away with no warning. She herself bore scars on her arms from scalding water thrown by the mistress when a dish was delivered too cold. The kitchen was both Harriet's prison and her weapon. She knew the ingredients, the herbs, the powders. She knew what could heal and what could kill. Life for Harriet was a cycle of fire and smoke, labor and punishment. Before the sun rose, she stoked the hearth, ground cornmeal, and prepared breakfasts for the Clyburn household. By midday, she was boiling meats, baking pies, tending to endless demands. In the evenings, she scrubbed pots until her fingers cracked. But her work gave her access. While others toiled under the overseer's whip in the fields, Harriet moved through the heart of the house. She overheard conversations, learned the habits of the masters, and handled every bite of food that passed their lips. This position, while dangerous, gave her power others did not have. That year, whispers spread among the enslaved about rebellion. The Fugitive Slave Act had tightened its grip. Slave patrols grew harsher and punishments more brutal. Yet still, the enslaved resisted in small ways, slowing their pace in the fields, breaking tools, stealing moments to rest. Some dreamed of escape, but for Harriet, escape seemed impossible. She had children, bound to the plantation as tightly as she was. Running meant leaving them behind. Her breaking point came weeks before Thanksgiving. Colonel Clyburn accused her of stealing flour, though she hadn't. In a fit of rage, he struck her with his cane in front of the others, splitting her lip. That night, as Harriet pressed a rag against the wound, she made her decision. If freedom could not be hers, vengeance would. Harriet began to plan quietly. In the pantry, she had access to herbs and roots used for medicine. She also knew of powders the master kept, rat poison, arsenic used to protect grain stores. She studied, waited, and gathered. When word came that the colonel would host a great Thanksgiving feast for his fellow planters, Harriet saw her moment. A dozen of them would sit together, drinking and feasting, never suspecting the woman who poured their wine and seasoned their food. She resolved that this meal would be their last. The day of the feast arrived. The kitchen roared with fire and chaos. Harriet prepared turkeys stuffed with herbs, bowls of sweet potatoes glazed with molasses, biscuits golden from the oven, and pies dusted with cinnamon. The smell filled every corner of the house. But in the shadows of the kitchen, hidden within bowls and bottles, Harriet worked her vengeance. Into sauces she sprinkled powders that dissolved without a trace. Into brandy she stirred poison that burned only after it was swallowed. Her hands were steady, her face calm, though her heart pounded in her chest. By late afternoon, the dining room table gleamed under candlelight. The masters arrived, dressed in their finest, boasting of profits and politics. They took their seats, clapping Harriet on the shoulder as she served, never seeing the fire in her eyes. They ate, they drank, they laughed. Turkey bones cracked beneath their knives. Gravy dripped from their spoons. Toasts were made to the bounty of the land and the loyalty of their slaves. But soon the first cough broke the air. A man clutched his stomach, his face pale. Another groaned, pushing his plate away. Glasses dropped, shattering on the floor. Panic spread as one by one the men doubled over, vomiting, gasping for breath. Some staggered from their chairs, collapsing on the carpet. Others clawed at their throats, desperate for air. Colonel Clyburn himself gripped the table, his knuckles white, sweat pouring down his face. He turned toward Harriet, eyes wide with realization, but before he could speak, his legs buckled. He fell to the ground, writhing in agony. The dining hall became a scene of chaos. Plates overturned, candles toppled, and the once proud masters groaned like wounded beasts. Harriet stood in the doorway, silent, watching the men who had treated her people as property reduced to helplessness. In that moment, the power shifted. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Of the 12 men poisoned, some died that night, others lingered in agony for days. Whispers of the incident spread quickly across the county. Plantations buzzed with fear. If a slave in the kitchen could turn the master's feast into a deathbed, no table was safe. Harriet was seized within hours. Dragged from the kitchen, beaten and chained, she faced the wrath of those who survived. Some records claim she confessed proudly, declaring that she would do it again if she had the chance. Others suggest she stayed silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of fear. Her punishment was merciless. Some accounts say she was hanged before the gates of the plantation as a warning. Others whisper she was burned alive, her screams echoing across the fields. What is certain is that Harriet did not survive. But her act left a scar. Slaveholders tightened control over their cooks and house servants, fearful that their own tables might betray them. Among the enslaved, Harriet's story spread as legend. She became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even in the heart of bondage, a woman could strike terror into her oppressors. History did not preserve her last name. To the records, she was only Harriet, slave of Colonel Clyburn. Yet her deed lived on in whispers, in fireside tales, in the unrecorded history passed through generations. For every slave who dreamed of revenge, Harriet's Thanksgiving became proof that even the mightiest could fall. This was Harriet's story. One woman, trapped in chains, who turned a holiday of gratitude into a feast of reckoning. Her name was nearly lost to time, but her act remains unforgettable. If you want to uncover more hidden slave stories, watch this playlist here, and don't forget to subscribe. For every week, we bring to light the history that others tried to bury. Until next time, remember, history is not only written by the victors. Sometimes it is carved into memory by those who dared to resist.